Hello friends, welcome back once again. So this is the episode 2 on our CAP learning journey, and as per the plan, today we'll focus on the Node.js, like get the basic fundamentals and also do certain hands-on kind of an exercises to get the good grip on the concepts, and definitely a couple of more videos I would like to spend on this Node.js. Assumption is the audience or who will be following this probably not all having a Node.js knowledge. So let's get the foundation, and then obviously we'll get into the actual CAP programming model development. I believe that should be more helpful to the viewers. If you have not yet watched the episode 1, where we'll just discuss about the purpose of CAPM and side by side the existence or rather coexistence of SAP Cloud SDK, how CAP is different from at a very high level, and also it spoke about certain things called extension suite, and we just touched upon the concept about in-app extension and side-by-side extension. So if this discussion interests you and you are really looking for a CAPM model, so definitely my recommendation and request would be to subscribe my channel and set your bell icon active so that you get notified the next episodes I'll publish on my channel. So let's understand what is Node. So Node is the runtime environment. It's a free and open source project. So that is, if you just go to GitHub, you will find this Node project. And Node allows to run JavaScript code at the server side. So let's understand better like why this Node is at all needed at the first case, right? So if we just think about this client side and server side architecture, what we do in general, we just create a web application with the help of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which eventually make a request to the server side, and we access the data or maybe resources from the server. Here, HTML is just for handling the structural part of the web application. CSS is for your cascading style sheet, means the look and feel. Whereas JavaScript does rest of the magic by making this application alive and interactive. So that means this JavaScript basically runs so far in the client side only, and thinks about, is it possible to run JavaScript also at the server side? But why I should run JavaScript at the server side? That's important, right? Because JavaScript doesn't do anything about handling certain machine activities. For example, file handling or maybe certain network calls. So that this JavaScript cannot do, because for that it has to run close to the operating system level, and which is the server. So question is, can I run JavaScript at the server side? So that's a question mark. Now JavaScript is a scripting language, so that means the code needs to be understood by the machine, and hence this machine code has to be converted. So there is something called JS engine or JavaScript engine that been built for every different browser. So if you just check for quickly the list of ECMAScript engines, you will find like this different browser. For example, Chakra is used for Microsoft Edge, whereas SpiderMonkey for Firefox and Mozilla. Similar way, if you go to V8 engine, it basically used for the Google Chrome, which is the fastest engine so far, which can convert JavaScript to machine code. So that means if we can place this V8 engine somehow over here, right? So can we, my bad, so I just wanted to keep this one and put it like that. So if we just have this V8 engine, because this engine is currently at the client side, so can we add V8 engine at the server side so that now the same conversion can happen? But still this V8 engine is not sufficient to connect with the backend system altogether. It needs some other things as well. We'll shortly see that also. But somehow the thought process came like, can we put this one over here? And this is the person. You can find the details in Wikipedia, Randall. So he basically just the brainchild of this Node.js project development. So he basically started this in 2009, and he started this Node.js project. So to put this V8 engine somehow to over here in the server side, so that now this can be used to build a runtime environment where this JavaScript can also be executed. So if you go to Node.js, so let's see the Node.js.org. So this is the place where from you can download this particular Node.js things, which will be is an installable things, and you can install to your machine. This is the long-term support version, and this is the kind of an experimental or current version. So definitely recommendation would be this one to install. So if you install this, that is the definitely your first thing, and once you install it, then you'll be able to work on the Node.js project. So you also spoke about that Node.js is kind of an open and free project. That means you can find it in the github.com, and this is the place you can come and check this out with Node, which is JavaScript runtime engine, and you can see this is kind of a files and structures and folders that will be installed from this particular installation file. So once you installed it, it's very simple. Nothing to talk about. You can just download based on your machine, like Linux or maybe Windows operating system. That way you can just install it. So after you install the Node.js in your machine, you can check by opening any of the command prompt that you have, and you can run node and -v. That's a version it will show. I think now it's visible more. At the same time, when you install Node.js, it also installs another thing called npm, and that is called Node Package Manager. We'll also talk about this one a little later. So let's also check at the same time if it's installed or not. Yes, it's also installed in my system. I installed it quite earlier, so the version may be different from your version, and that's pretty okay. That's not a problem. So let's interesting thing should be understanding the architecture of the node. So the code that we write in JavaScript that essentially will be coming to this node environment. It's the runtime environment, which contains certain standard library modules. For example, file system, HTTP, crypto, path, and so many others. But these are all kind of a JavaScript code that eventually to be converted to the machine, which is done by this V8, the JavaScript engine, as well as this important thing called libuv. So what happens, like whatever the code we write, that gets converted to the C++ code, which able to connect to the machine to perform the task. Let's say for generating a file or traversing through the directories, creating a network calls, kind of building our server, and also maybe generating certain hash value, hash key, or password. So those kind of things we can do that eventually will instruct the machine to perform. This V8 and libuv actually does the final job. So this is libuv is all about the C++ coding, and V8 as both JavaScript as well as C++ coding. But these are all kind of JavaScript things that eventually gets converted. So can we see this, this kind of an amalgamation of all V8 and libuv in our Node.js project? That will be pretty interesting, I believe. So let's check this out. So if you go to this Node project, these two folders will be important for you. One is the called leaf folder, the other one is the source folder or SRC. Now leaf contains all the JavaScript kind of models you will find over here, but the source SRC is containing the C++ representation, which basically gets converted using the help of V8. So if you go to leaf folder, scroll down a little, you will find something called V8 over here. Okay, and it has also a C++ representation that we'll find in the source folder. Now here, if we just go to internal, you will find different modules, like crypto is all for, we just spoke about, file system we spoke about, HTTP we spoke about, right? So certain things which are all standard delivered module that available, right, when we install the node. So let's understand the FS file system, and you will find certain things called streams. So let's check out the stream.js file. If you go inside, so this is a complete JavaScript code, and if you just scroll down a little, you will see this all required and dependencies, those kind of things being called, and stream open and those open read functions, that's been written over here, different callbacks. But interestingly, if you just scroll down a little further, from 83 lines, you will see that file handle operations. And here you'll have all this open, then close of the file, then read file, write file, etc. So those kind of things been written in this particular place. If you scroll down at the end, then you'll find this module actually export these two things, read stream and write stream, because file is a kind of a blob object, right? So that stream information, it just returns out of this module. So that's pretty interesting. So let's go to directory, and you will find this directory has all sort of some JavaScript coding, and it also returns certain things like open directory, then directory details, and open directory sync. But important thing would be something like internal binding. Okay, so this internal binding is all important here, because that's actually linkage with the v8 calls, because it's actually linked with this path fs and corresponding fs directory out of this directory file, a directory.js file. So let's check this now. Go back to our source folder quickly. We have seen the JavaScript part. Let's go to source folder, and here you will find something called the below, I guess. Something. Yeah, so these are the representation of the stream in details, but in a C++ and kind of a .h file, which is a C++ coding, right? So that it's all about having the v8 also, as you can see, representation. So I'm not going much deeper into that, because we'll lose out the focus, because we'll be doing certain exercise now to understand this kind of a server will create, and will make certain calls from client. So that will be much more interesting, of course, but wanted to also give you a quick glance like how these two folders are actually playing the role of interpreting or integrating. Let's quickly check one image or diagram I created for you. So this will be pretty easy to map what we discussed just now. So this is JavaScript code, and if we just go to it, basically goes to this lib folder, right, which is a node repository. Eventually you'll find certain things called internal binding that actually does a binding with the v8 engine, and from v8 engine it goes to the source representation, which contains all the C++ coding, and that finally comes to this libuv, which does the job for converting this to C++ and finally interacting with the machine. So this, I think this architecture is pretty easy now to follow along what we just have seen in the Node.js project. A lot of theory. So let's now do certain things and experience Node by certain exercise. We'll do it. I believe that will be pretty interesting now. So let's focus on that. Yeah, the development ID, that my preference is always VS Code, but definitely you can follow your choice. If you don't have it, you can install it. It's a free open source and given by Microsoft. Probably will also like this IDE for your development. So let's open the terminal. By default, in my case, it's PowerShell. Let me get to Git Bash, because this helps to run certain Unix commands. So I'll just run called touch and server. So now this file got created, and here I want to make use of the HTTP, that module we have just seen in the previous discussion. We can just get HTTP over here. Now let's create our actual server, and we can use HTTP there to create the server. It takes a listener, so you can write the function, but I'll prefer to use the arrow function, fat arrow. So that is the function that will create, and here I'll just take requests and responses and input parameters. Now to start this server, we will just create server.listen, and we can give a port name, any port name you can give, but I'll prefer to give 3000, and also run one console log. There we can just write all listening to port 3000. Okay, So that pretty much, and my current this server is actually empty. This particular callback function returns nothing. So what next? Let's save this file. It's no more changes pending. So let's run node index. I mean to say node server for our file name is server. So it is listening to port 3000. So let's go to 3000 now. So let's run local 3000. And you see that it's doing nothing. It's kind of a hang, looks like, right? No information is coming, nothing is going. So what probably the reason is because our server is actually running, but it's not sending back in the response. So let's put response.end, and we can put welcome to cap learning, or we prefer to say cap node learning, right? So now saving it, but still it is not giving any details. The reason being we have to restart the server. So for that, it's a control C, and then you can have to rerun this one. So node against server, it's again listening. So if we just click on restart, now you'll see welcome to cap node learning. My spelling is wrong, that's okay, but we're not able to get some response. So, but also let's understand certain things now, and that is, I'll put it in exercise 1. Inspect the request. Okay, so let's inspect the request details. So what we can do, we have to run again. I mean, we can extract or kind of a destructure the request information like headers, then URL, and then method. We can put this request. Okay, it should be comma, not dot. So this is something I'm extracting the details from, and now I can do a console log with all those values like headers, then URL, and then method. Okay, so this thing, if we just save it, again we have to restart the server by node node server. Okay, again it's running. So if I just make a request to, I'm getting this response, something wrong, because headers is not defined. It should be headers, not header. It should be headers again. So let's save it, because that's why I'm got the undefined, but it's boring. I have to restart again, right? Can I do something without restarting the server each time? So for that, what we can do, we have to install a module that is called nodemon, and in that case we don't need to rerun the server each time. We'll make a code changes. So for that, we need a package.json over here to handle the dependencies, and it is called npm. We already spoke about, right? When we install the node, this node package manager also got installed. So this node package manager will be helping me to generate this package.json. So it is npm init and -y. So if you don't put -y, just npm init, then it will ask for certain questions, and you just make those modifications as per you want. Like it will start with a question like package name as a default name node.js.demo. It takes version, default version, description, anything, entry point, server.js, test command, anything. So it just takes certain values, and it finally, if I'm okay and I'll click enter, it creates a package.json over here, right? So same thing will be done if I let me delete it and recreate one npm init, but this time I will not enter, but I'll put -y. This add-on will help me not to click multiple times, but it all takes as a default. Okay, so that's a help probably I generally prefer to use. So this is a package.json, and we need a dependency, and dependency is the nodemon. For that, npm install, you can put type install, or you can put npm I, that is a short form of install, then nodemon. So what will happen? It will download this nodemon from the npm package manager. You can go to the browser, you just check for npm js.org, and you can search over here called nodemon, and you'll find these things, and you see the download is huge, and it's a very popular thing that we should be using. Okay, and it's just a tool that helps develop Node.js based applications by automatically restarting the application when there is a changes in the file or directory detected. That's our interest. So we just installed, created a package.json. So now I'll just npm I nodemon. Now there is a command called -t. What will happen? It will tell like, hey, download nodemon, and that will be useful only for my development time. So once this application, let's say, want to deploy to production environment, then definitely you don't need this nodemon, right? It's only specific for your development duration. So setting it up as -t or minus save, or you can put like this, save t. That will also, or maybe save date. So that will also save it as a development dependency, or the short form is just -t. Enter. What will happen? It will install nodemon. It will download nodemon basically, and you'll see a node modules get created over here. Yeah, you see, and all the dependent files, you see the huge amount of files get downloaded as a dependency, because nodemon depends on some other files and other modules, because everything in Node.js is a module. So it's all dependent on that, and finally you'll see this one. Okay, so here you'll find this nodemon somewhere. Yeah, you see this nodemon over here. You go to bin, you have this nodemon.js file. So this is the file which we'll be using to run our code. So now to start that, what you can do, we can go to package.json once again, and you see that is called dev dependencies, for which this nodemon got installed. And let's take a start command as node server, but we can also write one more thing called start and dev. Here we can put something called nodemon and then server.js, or we can put simple server. That will also work. Okay, but let's put server.js. So save it. So what will happen? We can run npm run the command called start dev. What will happen? It will run nodemon, but starting nodemon, and eventually it will basically in a listening mode. So if I just go to server.js and make some changes, let's say I need method, we need to make this server, save it. So it will all listening. I just didn't make any code changes. Just click on save button. The server auto restart it, and that's what we are looking for. So now let's go back to our things. Make again a call, and I'm getting the response which is expected. But also at the same time, I would like to see my request details, like headers. You see the headers is coming all the way from this Mozilla as my user agent, because from Firefox I'm making a call, and this is the root, which is the information, and the method that's been used, HTTP method, is the get. That is what's been used over here. That's just an inspection of our server. So what will happen? Let's just see. If I just put /product. So this product's a particular route or route is to be used to get the products. Currently, we don't have any products as such. That's fine. But if I just call it, doesn't matter. The same response. But now the change you will find in the console log. This time you'll see the root becomes, or URL becomes, the /products. The rest of the information as it is. Pretty cool. Fine. So let's comment this code and make a little more this time. So next exercise, let's say we currently are sending this response, right? Whatever is a plain text. Can we send this response as an HTML? Then what to do? So in that case, what we'll do is, let's go for exercise 2 and sending a response either as text, or maybe we can call it plain text, or maybe HTML. Okay, so this is what our next exercise. We are already sending a response. So for that, there is something called response.set header, and we can put a content type this time. Content, not context, it's content type. and the value I can put it as text slash plain. That's it. So if I save it now, you see auto restart, and if I just again make a call, nothing changes because still it's a plain text. But let's change this one as an HTML. Okay, as a HTML, and now I can put something like h1 as an element, header element, and h1 as a closing element. My keyboard is not doing good today. Saving it again. What will happen? What do you expect? Voila. You now see the enter content is now changed to as a HTML, not more plain text. Next one should be sending the response in terms of let's say as a JSON. Okay, so because the API will be creating, and that API will be generally will expect the details should create as a JSON fashion, JavaScript object notation. So XSS 3 will be sending a response in JSON format. Okay, so that our XSS 3. That simple thing we have learned that the content type does the job well. So let's put set headers, and here again content type, and the value would be this time application slash JSON. That's it. And next the response dot end, and this time we'll send in a JSON fashion, JSON.stringify, and we can pass up kind of a JSON string and kind of a course name. We can call it as a CAPM node learning series. Okay, so something like that. It started back, and this time if I just make a response request to this, I'm expecting a JSON kind of a response. And if you just go to raw data, pretty print, you see the format, you probably can recall how it is actually looking in a JSON fashion. Our next exercise will be, so far we have just done the GET call, right? We're making a request from the browser. So let's do certain things, like we want to create an application and want to update or create certain data. So in that case, we'll make a post call. So our exercise 4 would be posting records. Okay, or making a post call. So that means in this case, first we have to ensure that this is a post call. So request, we know, like we can have a method in the request that we can check if this is really a post call or not. If it's a post call, then we can perform the action. So here from the post call, we'll send a payload, which will be a JSON payload, which we will be parsing in our this if block, and I'm planning to send the same details as a response. We'll not be actually storing any data. Maybe in our subsequent exercise we'll do that, but in this exercise we'll just whatever the payload will receive, we'll send back as a response. So to start with, there is an event called request.on, and this event we call it as a data. When the data comes, and we'll just make a listener, means a callback function, and we'll take it as a chunk of data. So this data we need to store it somewhere. So for that, let's create a variable called data, and we can put it as an empty array. So in this listener, what we want to do, whatever the chunk came, just push it to that empty array. Then again, kind of a chain operation, and this time when it's event called end, right? That means when the data is all complete processing, then we basically send back as a response. So again, we need a listener, and now our job is to parse the data, because data is actually came as a chunk information. We need to process this data and finally send back the data to us a response. So for that, we need to use a buffer this time. So we'll be using like, let's declare a constant called body, I mean the payload rather, but in string format, and use buffer. So buffer you don't need to download like we downloaded a node one. Then buffer dot, there is something called concat, and we can put this entered data array. Finally, we can convert to string. That's all. So once I do that, we'll get a string format of this one, and now we can send this as a, well, I can call it Json dot stringify, and I call it body string. So what will happen? Let's save it. It's again running. Now to test this one, we can do a lot of things. We can run by a postman, but to make it more simplified, I don't want to use a postman. Maybe in subsequent series of the node, probably we'll be using Express framework, and that time maybe I can also explain how we can test it in a node. I mean, sorry, in the postman. But for the time being, it's a very useful. You can create a file called test dot test.html. So here we can just type this way and then call post. I have already one extension, HTTP extension I have installed. So that's why it's coming like auto default. If it doesn't come, you can probably install that from the extension side over here. Okay. So what I want, my URL is HTTP because it's a local one, local host. And the port is 3000, of course. The header name, I want to use again the content type. So content type, and application JSON, that what I just want to pass as a payload. And this is kind of a, the body that I need to pass. So I can put a name, and I can put the name as a Somnath port. That's it. Okay, saving it. And what will happen if I make a request to this? You see automatically the same request, things are coming up so that you can click on this button. If everything fine, I'll get the response like that. But it's look little odd, right? It's enter things coming as a string, not a JSON. So what we can do, let's make a little bit modification, not much, I guess it should be required. So whatever the data we got, right, body string is a string format. So let's change it to JSON dot parse. Okay. And then we pass this body string, and let's see what happens. Save it. Okay, now let's go back. Let's close package.json. Let's make Somnath Paul developer just to make some changes. Saving it, and let's make a send request. Voila, you see now it's coming as a JSON and not as a string that was there before. Our final exercise for this episode will be a little more interesting now, because this time whatever the information I'll receive as a request, as a payload, that will be storing it in a file. Okay, so in a kind of a tabular format. So for that, let's comment this code. Let's create exercise 5, and we can like storing incoming payload in file. Anyway, that's fine. So now to start with, again the same funda, I mean something we have to just use request dot method, and make sure that it's a post operation. So, and then otherwise you can just, if it's not a post operation, then you can make a response dot end, and you can say welcome to Node.js tutorial. My keyboard is what happened. Okay. let's say this is the simple thing that we are going to do. So if I just make a simple request to this service, we'll find this one. And if I'm passing it through a HTTP post call, then we'll store that information. So what we want to store? So let's go here to the HTTP and let's frame the payload. I don't want to repeat it, so let's copy this one. And to start with one more, you have to make sure this you put and then paste it. Then only the send request thing will come, otherwise it will not come. So this time what we'll want to do, let's create an employee kind of a thing. Employee, okay? It's a list kind of. So array, and inside that we'll have a JSON, and we call it the employee name. We can call it as and a job role, or kind of the role as a developer. Okay, let's copy this one, kind of a duplicate, and let's say and this is on, let's say, architect. Okay, fine. So this is kind of a my payload, and what I want to do, then each time I make a request to, I want to generate a new file. So I want to create a file ID also along with. So file ID, we have to make it within a quotation because it's a JSON, not an object, and it should be, let's say, whatever we put it, that is 01. Okay, what about this? Something wrong. Yeah, we put 01. This one, right? Fine. So this is my kind of a payload. So what I am intending to do, I have to just create a file, and inside that I'll be creating a header with this name and role, and below will be having the name and the corresponding role information, and I'll keep on creating the file or generating the file based on this number, and it will if the file it does already exist, then it will just complain saying like the file does exist. Okay, so that pretty much the plan. So let's save this one, and we have not written any logic as of now. So go back to our logic, and the if block we have to write. So we know request dot on is an event which has this data, and the listener we have something as a chunk that we have to just take in. So let's take a variable, or maybe put it as late data as an empty array, right? This is the chunk of information that we want to call it or take it inside, and we can put data dot push, and we can just pass this chunk. That's all. So data gets entered, and now we can just use the event called end, and there again one callback function, arrow function, and what we want to do here, we need to again parse the payload. So for that, constant body string, and we can just write using buffer dot concat, and this is the data dot toString, right? So this is will give me the string information, but now I want the JSON information. So constant body, maybe JSON. I could have done in together also, but let's do it to make it break and understand what we are doing. It will be easy. So it's a JSON format of the same string value. So now we have to destructure, right? We have to get this employee and the field details, and we know how to destructure in the first exercise. Same thing we'll be using constant, and we'll be extracting the request information, and we need this employee, and also we need what? We need the file ID. Correct? Is that the file ID? Yeah, capital, right? So double click, make it employees. That makes sense. And here we put employees, and this is the file ID. Okay, save it. So once this been extracted, And but I prefer to, not the request, it's my bad. I believe the information what we got as a JSON, which should extract from here, not from request, because that is the purpose we all convert it into a JSON, right? And next is we want to use a path module now to generate the file. So for that we need one more thing, two more things rather. The first one is a file system to require, and we don't need to download anything from the npm because we know file system is a part of the direct node module. And similar way the path also. So let's send it to path and call it as path. Okay, so this path module will help us to generate the file. So whatever the files will create in a file called files and a folder. Okay, so inside that we'll be generating all the files. So let's go down below, and now what we want is we have to use this path module, right? So let's put constant if path rather, we can just do this way. Use the path module now, and we'll be using join. There double underscore directory name is what will get the current directory. Then the folder that we want to add to this path is files, and then the file name, right? File name, let's generate it as a test file, but we want to add the file ID, right? So then put it as a backtick so that we can use the text literal to test file underscore, and we can put a dollar, then we can put file ID. Okay, and then dot txt. So that is my overall file name to be created. Pretty cool. Okay, so that is my overall file path along with the file name, and each time I will change the file ID, that file will be created. Okay, so that is something, and this will be all handled by the path module because different operating system such as different kind of a file path. It can be forward slash or backward slash, so no need to take that hard coding. Let's use the path module and get those default setup of the operating system and generate your file name along with the path details. So what the next thing I want, the file, within this file we need a header, right? So you can just get a file content. That is our intention. So the first content will be the name, and the second one would be maybe after a tab /t. Then we want to add what called the role. So this is the first thing that will be added. Correct. Cool. So this is my file content, the first variable. Now whatever the employees will receive from this structuring, that is actually an array, so that we can use a map function of a JavaScript, and that we'll be using now. So employees dot map, and then we'll put an callback function inside that, and we'll take each one as a single employee. So it will loop through and will give me the employee per loop employee information. So we want to concatenate whatever received the header first, with that we'll concatenate. So that means this is equal to this class, but this time as a new line, because the header part is over and now the body part of my file content will be coming. So it will be a new line. And then what? Then we need employee is a object, so we need name, and then we can concatenate it with a tab, that's a /t. They can concatenate with role, right? I think that is the role. Role is fine. So this way we will keep concatenating with a new line. Each new record comes, it will be just adding up at the below of this earlier value. So that way this new line will be coming. So this is all fine. So what happens? So if the file already exists, then we have to, no need to store it. We have to just give a message sending back, hey, file does already exist. So let's put a validation now. If whatever the file that we have imported is, that's an exist sync is the function, and the path means the path of this f path, right? So this is where our file will be getting stored. And if this file does exist, right, then what we are going to do, we are just going to send simply a response, that response dot end, and we'll just give Json dot stringify, and we'll give an object, and the object to content message, we'll just say file already exists, right? So this will be my if block, and it is just closing it, no more thing to do. Else, if it is not that part, then we are going to create it now. So then now we'll be using fs dot write file, and it contains certain information as an argument. So first take the f path, of course, because that is the file path. Now the data is the data that we collected, right? So data is nothing but this file content. That is our data. Then option, you can just store it in UTF-8 format, right? And callback is the listener, means once the file gets saved, then what would be our thing? We can, two things, like the first one comes as a convention. The first one is error, and the second one is success. Okay, two values. So if error comes, just throw this error, right? And otherwise, response dot end, and we'll just see Json dot stringify, and there we'll just pass the object, and this time the object is message, and we can just call file created successfully, right? So this is what we are going to do. So if the file doesn't exist, then this validation will not be triggered, and it is supposed to generate the file under the files directory or files folder. So what next? Something just to test it, right? Can we just do testing and see if it is working or some problem? Let's see. So let's make a call and see what happens. Hope everything should be fine. Voila, file created successfully. If I go to this files, this one create, you see test file _01, because that was our ID. If you see this content, voila, you see name, role, and the information. So if I just make 02, it will create one more file, and just click on send. Again, file created successfully 02, and this time also the same content, because we didn't make a content change. But if we try again, file already exists, so validation works. That pretty much for this episode 2. I think it was helpful, but next episode will be more on the Express framework, because whatever we did is not a very convenient way of doing the things. We have a better option, right? So that we are going to learn in our next episode, where we'll be not be using HTTP as such, but we'll be using Express framework, and we'll create our servers, and we'll do a lot more things with the Express. A lot of things to learn in Node. It's just the beginning. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Share your feedback, and also share this content to your network, so that others can also get to know if they're also interested to learning CAP as well as the Node. See you soon. Take care.